When my adopted daughter found her birth family, she blocked me from attending her college send-off dinner. But when her birth mom asked her to pitch in for the bill, she tried using my bank card and realized everything had changed immediately. What happened next was rather unbelievable. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Ian Gaston from Shropshire, England. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I never expected to be replaced so quickly. That's the part that kept clawing at my chest every night. More than the silence, more than the cold looks, more than the passive-aggressive thank yous she'd toss over her shoulder like crumpled paper. My name is Rochelle, and for 18 years, I was mom. Not the backup, not the fill-in, not the side note. I was the one who stayed up when she had night terrors, who packed lunches with stupid little notes inside because I wanted her to feel seen, and who taught her how to drive even though I was white-knuckling the passenger seat the whole time. I was there through braces and breakups and birthday parties where no one showed up but me and a store-bought cake. And yet, in the span of a few short months, everything unraveled the moment she found her birth family. Everything I had poured into her, years of love, sacrifice, emotional labor, suddenly felt like a debt she had paid off. And now that it was settled, she no longer had any use for me. It started with little changes. She stopped calling me mom and started using my name, like we were coworkers. I let it slide the first few times, thinking maybe it was just part of her growing independence. I didn't want to smother her. I know how important it is for young women to find themselves. But what I didn't expect was that she'd try to find herself by cutting me out entirely. She'd come home late, smelling like perfume I didn't recognize, talking about them like they were a dream come true. My real brother said I should try this internship, or my birth mom's helping me plan my dorm layout. My stomach would twist every time, but I'd nod like I wasn't bleeding out behind my smile. Because if I objected, I'd look insecure or controlling. If I said how it made me feel, she'd accuse me of being jealous of the woman who gave her away. So, I said nothing and watched her slowly fold me out of her life like a corner of a page she no longer intended to read. Then came the send-off dinner. She mentioned it in passing, careful, vague, like she already knew I wouldn't like what she had to say. "Oh, we're doing a little dinner before I leave," she mumbled while scrolling on her phone, not even looking up. "Just something small with the family." I smiled, trying to catch her eye. "I'd love to help plan it," I said gently. "Should we do it here?" "I could cook," she cut me off. "No, it's just my real family. They're doing it. You wouldn't want to come." I remember standing there in the kitchen, holding a dish towel, my fingers shaking. "What do you mean I wouldn't want to come?" I asked, the tremble in my voice betraying me. She finally looked at me then, flat, tired, like she'd outgrown me. "It's just for blood family. You understand." No, I didn't understand. Not one bit. That night, I stayed up until 2 a.m. scrolling through old photos. Her first Halloween in that pumpkin costume, her high school graduation, the look on her face when I surprised her with concert tickets she'd begged for. I remembered the time she had strep throat, and I slept on the floor beside her bed for 3 nights straight, just in case she needed water or a cold cloth. I remembered her first heartbreak and how we ate ice cream from the tub and watched sappy movies until she stopped crying. Wasn't that real? Wasn't that family? But to her, apparently, DNA outweighed everything else. I had raised her, poured every ounce of myself into her, and yet the second someone with matching blood showed up, I was benched. No warning, no conversation, just discarded. I didn't go to the dinner. I wasn't invited. I didn't text her, didn't call. I just let the night come and go in silence. I imagined her sitting in a fancy restaurant, dressed up, laughing with strangers who shared her cheekbones and her last name, who had missed 18 years of her life, but somehow got the honor of seeing her off. I wondered if she even mentioned me. I wondered if anyone there knew who had paid for the very college she was being celebrated for. Spoiler, it was me. I saved every damn year. Said no to vacations, to new clothes, to dinners out with friends. Also, she could leave this house with less debt and more options. And now, She'd given that seat at the table to someone who had ghosted her existence until it was convenient. I don't think I slept that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the hum of the ceiling fan too loud, too soft, too everything. I kept thinking, is this what motherhood comes down to? 18 years of invisible work only to be forgotten when the credits roll? I wasn't looking for a medal, but God, I thought I'd at least get a goodbye. Some kind of closure. But I got nothing. Just the sound of a slammed door and the echo of blood family, like a curse in my ears. I felt like I was grieving a death, but no one had died, except maybe the version of her who used to call me Mom and mean it. When the sun finally came up, I made myself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair where she used to sit for breakfast. She hadn't eaten with me in weeks, but I always set her place anyway, like some pathetic ritual I couldn't let go of. That morning, I didn't. That morning, I logged into our shared bank account and quietly removed her card access. Not out of revenge, but as a necessary act of self-respect. If I wasn't good enough to be part of her life, then my money shouldn't be either. She had made her choice. Now I was making mine. The first text came in at 9:03 a.m., a fraud alert from my bank, asking if I had authorized a $312 charge at the Garden House Bistro. At first, I thought it was spam, the kind of phishing scam you delete without opening. But something about the name rang a bell. I opened the notification and stared at the timestamp. 8:57 p.m. last night. The exact same time her send-off dinner would have been wrapping up. My stomach tightened as I stared at the screen. The Garden House was a trendy, overpriced restaurant uptown, the kind of place you booked for special occasions. I knew because I had once considered making a reservation there for her 17th birthday, but when I saw the menu prices, I chose a homemade dinner and cake instead. Apparently, she had no such hesitation now, especially not when she thought she could use my money. I confirmed with the bank that the charge had been declined, and I asked if they could check which card was used. The woman on the phone was polite but curt, clearly reciting from a script. Yes, ma'am, it was your authorized user's card ending in 2245. That was her card. The one I'd let her use for books, gas, emergencies, essentials. Not shrimp cocktail and craft cocktails. I asked if any other transactions had been attempted. 3, in fact. All declined. All between 8:57 and 9:01. I pictured her standing there, at a table of smiling strangers, trying to play the part of the responsible daughter with her shiny card and air of maturity, only to have her fantasy collapse in front of everyone. There was a part of me, a very small, very bitter part, that felt a flicker of satisfaction. Not because I wanted to humiliate her, but because I needed her to understand that you can't block someone out of your life and still treat them like an ATM. I didn't hear from her that night. Not a text, not a call, not a knock on the door. Just silence. I imagined her birth mom stepping in to pay the bill, eyes narrowing at the awkwardness, wondering what kind of adoptive mother would embarrass her daughter like that. I imagined the judgment, the whispers, the subtle shift in their smiles. Maybe they all looked at her differently now. Maybe they finally realized she wasn't quite as independent as she wanted them to believe. I knew it wasn't fair to think like that, but I couldn't help it. I had been made to feel disposable, and now she had to face the cost of that decision, literally and emotionally. The next morning, she showed up at my door. I wasn't even dressed yet. Still in my robe, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee when I heard the knock. It wasn't timid. It was loud, urgent, angry. I opened the door to find her standing there in full makeup from the night before, mascara smeared under her eyes like bruises, lips tight with frustration. She looked tired, not just physically, but emotionally worn. "What the hell, Mom?" she snapped, not waiting for an invitation before pushing past me into the living room. It was the first time she'd called me Mom in weeks, but the way she said it didn't feel like love. It felt like accusation. I closed the door behind her and followed, my heart already thudding with the weight of what was coming. She turned on me like I was a stranger. "Why did you block my card?" she demanded, arms crossed like I was a teenager who had stolen her car. I didn't answer right away. I sat down slowly, set my coffee on the table, and met her glare. "You blocked me from your life?" I said quietly. I figured it was only fair. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked genuinely shocked, like she hadn't anticipated I'd have the nerve to say it aloud. "You embarrassed me," she said finally, her voice trembling now. "In front of everyone. My birth mom had to pay for the whole thing. Do you know how that looked?" "Yes," I said calmly. "It looked like you expected someone you cut out of your life to keep footing the bill for your new one." She recoiled like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair," she whispered. "I never said I didn't love you." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound I didn't recognize as my own. "You didn't have to say it. You showed it. You showed it when you didn't invite me. When you called her mom in front of your friends. When you erased me so easily the second you found someone who shared your DNA. I could feel my hands shaking, but I didn't stop. And now you want my money? You want me to be the invisible support system who pays for the spotlight you gave to someone else." She sat down across from me, arms limp at her sides now. "I didn't think you'd cut me off yet," she murmured, barely meeting my eyes. That word, "yet," hit like a hammer. "So you knew I would eventually," I said, the pain crawling up my throat like bile. "You just hoped you could squeeze one last favor out of me before I got smart." She didn't deny it. That silence said everything. "You want independence, sweetheart?" I added, standing up. "That includes financial. You can't block me as your mother but keep me on as your sponsor. That's not how this works." She started to cry then. Real, broken sobs that twisted my insides and made me want to wrap her up in my arms like I used to when she was little. But I didn't move. I sat there and let her cry. Because sometimes love means letting someone feel the sting of their choices. Sometimes love means stepping back, even when every part of you wants to step forward. She wiped her face with her sleeve and looked at me with eyes I barely recognized. "I didn't think it would end like this," she whispered. "Neither did I said, just as softly. But it had, and there was no turning back now. She came back the next morning, same time, same tears, but this time she didn't even knock. She just sat on the porch like she belonged there, like she hadn't burned this bridge with her own match and gasoline. I watched her through the curtain for a full 5 minutes before I opened the door. She was hunched over, arms wrapped around her knees, her makeup smudged again, this time not from a long night out, but from a long night in, the kind you spend pacing the floor, realizing you've made a mistake, but can't figure out how to undo it without swallowing your pride. Her backpack was slung at her feet like an afterthought, and for a moment, I almost mistook her for the little girl who used to wait for me outside ballet class, clutching her teddy bear with both hands and looking for my car. But that little girl had called me Mom with her whole heart. This one was here because her safety net had snapped and she didn't know where else to land. I opened the door and leaned against the frame. "You're early," I said flatly. She looked up, startled, like she didn't think I'd actually come out. I didn't know where else to go," she stammered, wiping at her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. Her voice cracked with the kind of vulnerability that used to make me drop everything, the kind that once had me driving through snowstorms just to bring her soup. But now it hit differently. Now, it felt like someone else wearing my daughter's skin. I didn't move from the doorway. "Why didn't you go to your real mom's place?" I asked, and it came out colder than I intended. Her face twisted like I'd slapped her, and in a way, I guess I had. She deserved to know what it felt like, being told you're second string in someone's life, being dismissed as replaceable. She stood then, shakily, her knees cracking as she straightened. "I messed up," she said quietly. "I know that. But you don't have to be cruel." I blinked at that. Cruel? I had spent the last few months swallowing heartbreak whole, pretending to be unaffected every time she blew past me in the hallway or texted her birth mom from the dinner table. I had tiptoed around her new loyalty like it was fragile glass I didn't want to shatter. And now she thought I was the cruel one because I didn't want to bankroll her fantasy anymore? "I'm not being cruel," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I'm being clear. There's a difference." I opened the screen door slightly and pointed at the backpack. "If you're here for money or a place to crash, you'll have to ask the people you chose instead of me." She blinked rapidly, her jaw trembling like she wanted to argue but didn't know how. "They're not what I thought," she whispered. It's not how I imagined." Her voice faltered. She wanted me to pay for my share of the dinner. Said it was important for me to learn responsibility. But she didn't tell me that beforehand. She waited until the check came and just slid it to me. Her hands were shaking now. She said, "You're grown now. Start acting like it. I stayed quiet, letting her words hang in the air between us. It sounded like tough love, but maybe tough love hits different when it comes from someone who never bothered to raise you. For a moment, I felt the urge to fold, to pull her into the house and make her a warm breakfast, to fix it all like I always used to. But then I remembered the look on her face when she told me I wasn't invited to her send-off dinner. I remembered her laughing into her phone, calling her birth mom the real MVP. I remembered walking past her bedroom that night and hearing her say, "Yeah, she was just the woman who raised me. But you're my actual mom." That sentence had echoed in my head for days. Just the woman who raised me. Like my entire motherhood had been reduced to a placeholder until someone better showed up. And now, when reality didn't match her fairy tale, she wanted to come back and pick up where we left off, like love could be hit with a pause button and resumed when convenient. "You made your choice," I said, stepping fully onto the porch now. And I respected it. But choices come with consequences. You don't get to disappear me when it suits you, and then resurrect me when things fall apart. She looked away, her chin quivering. "I didn't think you'd actually let me go," she whispered, almost like she hated admitting it. That got to me, because of course she didn't. I'd always been the one who held everything together. I was the glue, the safety net, the quiet force in the background making sure nothing fell apart. But I wasn't that anymore. I couldn't be. I wouldn't. A neighbor across the street was mowing his lawn, and I noticed him glance over at us. I didn't care. Let them see. Let the whole world see what it looks like when a mother draws the line no one thinks she ever will. "I love you," I said, my voice catching a little despite myself. But love isn't permission to use people. I've been your mom in every way that counts. But you've treated me like a backup plan. And I can't keep being the person you fall back on when your fantasy doesn't work out. She looked stunned, like she hadn't considered that love had limits. That I, too, could reach a breaking point. "So that's it?" she asked, voice hollow. "You're just done?" I nodded slowly. "For now? Yes. Until you figure out what family really means. Until you learn to love without using." I turned and went back inside, closing the door behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't lock it. But I didn't open it again either, even when I heard her soft sobs start up again. Even when I heard her gather her things and walk back down the steps, her footsteps fading down the street. I sat on the couch afterward, staring at the spot she had stood on the porch, and felt something shift in me. Not peace, not relief, but resolve. I hadn't closed the door out of spite. I closed it to survive. I had given her everything. And now, I was giving her the space to figure out if that had ever meant anything to her at all. 3 days passed in quiet tension, the kind that doesn't rattle the windows but lives beneath the floorboards, humming like a wire about to snap. I didn't hear from her. Not a knock, not a call, not even the cowardly comfort of a text. Just absence. And I'll admit, I kept checking. Every morning I glanced out the window just a little longer than necessary. Every night, I left the porch light on longer than I should have. Hope is a stubborn thing. It's not soft or poetic. It's sharp and inconvenient, digging into your chest every time you think you've finally let go. But that morning, when the phone rang, I knew before I even answered. I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut twisted the way it always did when she was involved. I answered, half dreading, half desperate. "Hello," I said, voice low and cautious. There was a pause, and then I heard her voice. Not hers exactly, but one that sounded like hers, only older, cooler, clipped with practiced patience. "Hi, this is Valerie. I'm, her birth mother." She didn't even say my daughter's name. Just her. Like I didn't already know. Like I hadn't memorized every syllable of that girl's life since the day I held her in my arms. I stayed quiet, waiting. Valerie continued. "I just wanted to clarify some things. She's really upset, and I think maybe there's been a misunderstanding." I could hear her chewing gum on the other end, unbothered, breezy in that way only someone who hasn't done the hard work of mothering can afford to be. "She feels like you kind of blindsided her. The card thing? It really embarrassed her." I don't know what snapped first, my patience or my restraint, but I finally spoke. "Let me make one thing very clear," I said, each word deliberate. "You don't get to call me and guilt-trip me for not paying for a dinner I wasn't invited to. You don't get to act like I blindsided her when she's the one who blocked me out of her life like I never existed. I raised her. Alone. For 18 years. Where were you when she had pneumonia at 6 and I slept in a hospital chair for 3 nights? Where were you when she sobbed into my shirt after her first breakup? You were nowhere. But now you're back, and you want to play house. And I'm just supposed to keep paying for it. There was silence on the line. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that told me I had finally said something no one else had the guts to. Valerie cleared her throat. Look, I didn't mean to cause any problems. I just thought maybe you'd want to help her. She's still your daughter. And that's when I laughed. I didn't mean to. It just came out, bitter, sharp, hollow. She was my daughter. Until she told people I was just the woman who raised her. My voice cracked on the last part, and I hated that it did. She didn't say that. Valerie replied quickly, but the pause afterward betrayed her. She knew. She'd heard it. Maybe she even encouraged it. She did, I said quietly. And I heard it with my own ears. After I hung up, I sat on the floor of the living room, knees pulled up to my chest, and just breathed. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The well was dry. I was exhausted from grieving someone who was still alive, still breathing, still walking around with my heart in her back pocket like it wasn't worth a damn. I thought about all the times I'd defended her, even to myself. She's just going through a phase. She's confused. She's trying to connect the pieces of her identity. But this wasn't confusion. This was choice. And she had chosen, again and again, to belittle, dismiss, and replace me. And for what? A woman who couldn't be bothered to show up until it was time for photo ops and fancy dinners? That night, I went through my closet and found the baby blanket I had kept all these years. It was soft and faded, still smelling faintly of the lavender detergent I used when she was little. I held it in my lap and traced the stitching I'd sewn by hand. The initials I gave her, not the ones she now used like a badge of new identity. I thought about burning it, about closing this chapter completely. But something in me couldn't do it. Not out of love, but out of memory. Because no matter what she said now, I was the woman who held her through night terrors, who kissed her skin knees, who stood at every recital even when she forgot to look at me in the audience. That mattered, even if only to me. The next day, I got a knock at the door again. This time, when I opened it, she didn't look broken. She looked angry. Her arms were crossed, her jaw tight. Why did you tell her that I called you just the woman who raised me? She snapped. I told her that in confidence. I didn't mean it like that. I blinked, stunned by her gall. You said it. You meant it. You've been acting like it. So don't stand here and try to spin it like I twisted your words. Her face flushed with indignation. You're making this worse. I came here to talk, not fight. Then maybe you should have come here with something other than excuses. I shot back. She looked away, blinking fast. It was just a bad moment. I was trying to explain our relationship to people who don't get it. Then explain this, I said, stepping closer. If I'm just the woman who raised you, why are you still trying to use my bank card? Why are you coming to my house when things fall apart? You don't get to throw away a parent and then come back when the world isn't as kind as you thought it'd be. Her lip trembled. I don't want your money. I just, what? I cut in. You just want my guilt? My silence? My support when it's convenient? You can't cherry-pick pieces of me. I'm not a buffet. I'm your mother. Or at least, I was. She stood there for a while, looking at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. And I guess I was. Because for the first time in her life, I wasn't bending. I wasn't smoothing the path or softening the blow. I was done being the fallback. And she was finally seeing that. It was only a matter of time before the phone rang again. This time, I knew who it was before I even checked the screen. Valerie, the woman who gave birth to my daughter, vanished for nearly 2 decades, then reappeared with open arms and empty hands, just in time to claim the title of real mom. I let it ring twice before I answered. I wanted her to sweat, wanted her to know she was calling someone who wasn't playing polite anymore. Hello, I said, my voice low, emotionless. She sounded chipper, like we were old friends. Hey, it's Valerie again. Look, I wanted to touch base about what happened the other day. I think things got a little heated between you and her, and honestly, I just want what's best for everyone. I didn't say anything. I just waited, letting her fill the silence with her self-justifications. I talked to her last night, she continued. and she's really upset. She says you're being harsh and that she didn't mean to hurt you. Maybe you could just, forgive and move forward. I laughed, quiet but sharp. Forgive and move forward. I repeated, is that what she wants? Or is that what you want because you don't want to deal with the mess you helped create? She tried to cut in, but I didn't give her the space. You want to play mother now? Great. That's your right. But don't you dare come to me asking for grace after watching her treat me like trash. Don't ask me to smooth this over so you can keep being the hero without ever doing the heavy lifting. She exhaled heavily. Look, I know I wasn't there. And I'm sorry for that. But I'm here now. Isn't that what matters? The question landed like a slap. I stood up from the couch and started pacing the room, phone pressed tightly to my ear. No, I said. What matters is consistency. What matters is showing up when it's hard, when it's thankless, when no one is clapping for you. I didn't get to disappear when she slammed doors and cursed me out. I stayed. I stayed through all of it. And now, you swoop in with your shared cheekbones and Instagram photos, and she calls you her mother while I get reduced to just the woman who raised her. And you think I'm the one who needs to forgive and move forward? She tried to soften her voice. She's just trying to figure out who she is. She's 18. Kids make mistakes. I stopped pacing. My hand tightened around the phone. No. Kids steal candy and lie about homework. This was betrayal. This was choice. Don't insult me by calling it a mistake. She didn't reply right away, and I could tell she was finally understanding that I wasn't the kind of woman who folded under pressure. She said you cut her off, Valerie mumbled. That you shut the door on her. I swallowed hard. I didn't shut the door. She walked out and locked it behind her. I just didn't open it again when she knocked with guilt in one hand and entitlement in the other. After the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the hallway mirror for a long time. My face looked tired, older than it had the week before. Grief does that. It doesn't just live in your chest. It crawls into your skin, your eyes, your spine. I had spent the better part of 2 decades raising a child who no longer wanted to claim me, and now I was supposed to what? Apologize for not being a doormat? I thought of all the women I knew who had been erased by their children after adoption reunions. All the mothers who had sown love into every fiber of their kids' lives only to be replaced like they were never more than a foster home. And the world always asked the same thing of them. Be bigger. Be forgiving. Be quiet. But I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. That evening, I logged into our joint college fund account, the one I had opened for her the day she started kindergarten. Every birthday check, every extra bonus I earned from working overtime, every skipped vacation, piled into that account for her future. I stared at the balance and felt nothing. No pride, no grief, just a strange calm as I clicked the button to close it. I transferred what was mine back into my account and moved the rest into a separate trust, one she'd only get access to if she came back with an apology, not a demand. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. If she wanted to build her life without me, she could do it without my money too. Around 9 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. You really shut the account? Wow. You're punishing me for finding my family. You're unbelievable. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I'm not punishing you for finding your family. I'm just finally believing you when you said I wasn't part of it. She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. Instead, I made myself a small dinner, salmon and roasted vegetables, and ate it on the back porch. The sky was bruised with clouds, a storm threatening in the distance, but the air was calm. For the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel haunted by her absence. It just felt like mine again. I sipped wine and let the silence hold me, not as a punishment, but as a promise. A reminder that peace sometimes follows the loudest kind of heartbreak. And in that moment, I didn't feel like a villain. I felt like a mother who had finally chosen herself. A week passed. 7 long, echoing days without a call, without a text, without even a bitter ping of accusation in my inbox. The quiet no longer felt like punishment. It had become a boundary. A border I had drawn not with rage or spite, but with the kind of clarity that only comes after you've cried enough to empty a river and stood in the wreckage long enough to realize you don't want to rebuild what was there. I spent those days taking long walks, clearing out her old room. Not as an act of revenge, but as an act of restoration. I boxed the childhood stuffed animals, the trophies, the journals she probably forgot she left behind. Every item went into a labeled container, sealed, and stacked neatly in the garage. Not thrown away, but not welcome in the house, either. Just like her. It was during one of those silent afternoons, the sunlight pouring through the kitchen window, that I found the envelope. Tucked into the side of the junk drawer, where we used to keep extra charger cords and fast food ketchup packets. It sat innocently, the handwriting unmistakably hers. I don't know why she left it. Maybe she meant to give it to me. Maybe she hoped I'd find it later, when the smoke had cleared. I hesitated before opening it, every muscle in my body tightening like I was preparing for a hit. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, torn along the spiral edge. Her handwriting was messy, rushed. At the top, she'd written, "I didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter. That was all it took, tears. Hot, sudden, and unwanted." I read the rest quickly, afraid I'd stop if I slowed down. She talked about being confused, about wanting to belong somewhere that looked like her, about feeling torn between loyalty and curiosity. She admitted that she'd said hurtful things and that she thought I would always be there, no matter how far she pushed. But the thing that broke me, more than anything, was the last line. "If you hate me now, I understand. But I hope one day you'll remember that I was your little girl first." I sat down, letter trembling in my hands, and felt something shift, not forgiveness, not softness, but complexity. This wasn't a story of clean villains and blameless victims. This was a story of fractured people trying to make sense of their own pain. And while I didn't condone how she handled it, I finally saw the child in her again. The scared one, the uncertain one, the one who still wanted to be loved even as she pushed me away with both hands. But that didn't mean I could open the door again. That didn't mean I could unknow what she had said or undo how she had made me feel. So discarded, so replaceable, so invisible. I sat on the porch again that evening, watching the sky turn dusky blue, and thought about what it meant to love someone who no longer made space for you. People say unconditional love means taking someone back no matter what, but I don't believe that anymore. Real love, adult love, has conditions, and one of them is respect. Another is reciprocity. You don't get to claim the benefits of my love while spitting on the foundation it was built on. You don't get to exile me and still expect me to play mother when it's convenient. The next morning, I mailed the box of her things to her campus address. I didn't include a note. I didn't want to confuse her with sentiment. She needed to know I'd moved forward, not in anger, but in truth. That night, I got a voicemail. She didn't ask me to call back. She didn't beg me to reconsider. She just said, "I got the box. I understand. I wish things were different, but I get it now. I just wanted to say thank you for everything, even if I didn't say it when it counted." And that was it. No fairy tale ending. No tearful reunion. Just a quiet voice on the line, full of regret, maybe even growth, hanging in the air like a lullaby with no chorus. People like to believe every rift can be repaired. That's the story we're sold. Redemption, forgiveness, a hallmark bow on top of years of silence and hurt. But the truth is, sometimes relationships die without ever being buried. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop performing the role someone expects from you and walk away with your dignity intact. I didn't hate her. I didn't wish her harm. But I couldn't go back to being the woman who kept giving while being asked to shrink smaller and smaller just to fit in her shadow. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day we'll find our way back, not to what we were, but to something new, something honest. Or maybe this is the end of our story together. Either way, I'm not waiting at the door anymore. I'm living my life. I'm reclaiming my peace. I'm letting go of the fantasy that love always wins and embracing the truth that boundaries sometimes have to. Because loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. And I loved her. I still do. But I love me more now. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you raised, loved, or sacrificed everything for because they stopped seeing your worth? This story isn't just about a mother and daughter. It's about the moment you stop being someone's safety net and start being your own sanctuary. If you've ever had to choose peace over people, share your story in the comments. And if this spoke to something deep in you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There's more where this came from. and your story deserves to be heard. See you soon in the next one. I raised my daughter alone when her mother left during her childhood. But when it was time for her graduation, she sent me a message 2 hours in advance that parents were no longer invited. I was already sitting in the auditorium with other parents and decided to wait. When she showed up, she was with her mom and her stepdad. What happened next was simply unbelievable. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Abraham Mount from London. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I still remember the sound of the front door slamming shut that morning, like a gavel announcing the end of a trial I hadn't realized was even happening. My daughter, Ariel, was 6 years old. Her cereal sat untouched on the table, milk turning warm in the bowl shaped like a cartoon elephant. Her mother didn't say goodbye. No explanation. Just her suitcase wheeling over the hardwood floor, and then that final echo. I didn't cry right away. I didn't scream. I cleaned up the cereal, packed Ariel's lunch, brushed her hair, and walked her to school like nothing had happened. That's how it starts, you know. Single fatherhood. It's not some noble declaration. It's a quiet decision to just keep going when the world gives you no other option. And so I kept going, for 17 years. In those early days, I barely slept. My job at the auto repair shop paid just enough to cover rent, groceries, and the occasional emergency. Ariel would sit on a milk crate in the corner of the garage after school, swinging her legs, reading books far beyond her age group, while I changed oil and rotated tires. She never complained. Not once. If anything, she seemed to sense the weight I was carrying and tried to make herself lighter. She'd draw me pictures, stick figures of me fixing cars, and her holding a giant wrench beside me. "We're a team, Daddy," she used to say. And we were. Her mother called occasionally, always from some new city, usually around the holidays. Ariel would smile when she heard the ringtone, then cry when the call ended. I never badmouthed her mother. Never told her about the affairs, or the time I found a secret bank account with thousands of dollars she'd siphoned off while I was working overtime. I let Ariel build her own truth about her mom, because I believed children shouldn't carry their parents' bitterness. I see now that maybe that was my first mistake. Raising her was never easy, but it was always sacred to me. I attended every school play, even the ones where she was just a tree in the background. I learned how to braid her hair from YouTube tutorials. I stayed up all night once sewing a costume for her 5th grade Halloween parade when she wanted to be a robot unicorn princess. When she got older and the questions started about periods, boys, friendships falling apart, I fumbled, but I showed up. I let her talk. I listened. And on the nights when she couldn't sleep, when anxiety made her tremble and cry, I would sit on the edge of her bed, rubbing her back until her breathing slowed. "I've got you, baby," I'd whisper. Always. It became our thing. She'd say it back sometimes, her little voice cracking. Always. There were moments, years even, when I believed I had done something close to right. When she got into that elite high school program, the one where she had to take a 2-hour bus ride each way, I told her, "Don't worry about the cost." I picked up extra shifts. I sold my old motorcycle. I clipped coupons and stopped buying coffee altogether. And when college acceptances started rolling in, I watched her open the letters with tears in my eyes. She was going to be the first in the family to get a degree. She chose a school out of state, one with prestige and a hefty price tag. And even though it broke my heart, I encouraged her. "Fly high," I told her. "But remember who packed your parachute." The calls came less frequently after that. First it was weekly, then monthly. By her junior year, I mostly heard from her when she needed something. A textbook, emergency rent, a deposit for study abroad. I didn't complain. I just wired the money and told myself this was part of letting go. But deep down, something had shifted. Her tone grew distant. She referred to her mother as Mom, again, without hesitation, without the caution she once used. She mentioned her stepdad, David, a name I had never heard her say before, as if he had quietly taken up space in her life and now occupied a room I used to live in. I told myself it was okay, that this was part of growing, that love doesn't always look like gratitude. But still, every time she ended a call with "thanks, bye," instead of "love you," something in me cracked a little. I'd been planning her graduation day for months. I'd taken off work, booked a hotel, even ordered a suit, my first new one in over a decade. I was proud, not of myself, but of her, of us. I wrote a speech I'd never get to read, imagining her laughing at my dad jokes and crying when I quoted that old, always line. I even went the extra mile to surprise her with a full scholarship I'd privately arranged for her master's program. Something I could barely afford, but had made happen by selling my late father's watch collection. That part stung, but I knew she'd be thrilled. I wanted to give her something big, something permanent, something she'd never forget. Turns out, I was right, just not in the way I hoped. Graduation morning, I ironed my shirt 3 times. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I got to the auditorium early, found my seat, and struck up nervous conversations with other parents. I remember one woman next to me saying, "You must be so proud of your daughter." I smiled and said, "I raised her on my own." The woman patted my arm and said, "Well, you must have done a damn good job." My chest swelled. I took out my phone to check the time, and that's when her text came in. "Hey Dad, they changed the rules. Parents can't come in anymore. Sorry." At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she sent it to the wrong person. But as I looked around, other parents were still arriving, being ushered in by smiling volunteers. My brow furrowed. I stood up. That's when I saw her, Ariel, walking through the side door in her cap and gown. Her smile was wide, radiant. On her left arm was her mother, elegant as ever in a cream-colored dress. On her right, a tall man in a suit, holding her arm like he belonged there. They looked like the perfect family. My heart thudded. I stepped forward instinctively, half raising a hand to wave, to call out, but she saw me first. Her face fell. She pulled away from them and walked toward me, her expression souring with every step. "You're too stubborn," she hissed under her breath. "Why are you here?" Then louder, with a performative laugh for her mother and stepdad. "It's my happy day, and I only want to be with the people I love." That moment stretched forever. My breath caught in my throat. My feet felt rooted to the spot. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the little girl in the unicorn costume, not the teenager clinging to me during panic attacks, but a stranger. A woman who had rewritten our story without me in it. So I smiled. A soft, sad smile. And I walked away. The air outside the auditorium felt thicker than it should have on a spring morning. I remember the way the sun hit the pavement, how the laughter of other families echoed off the stone walls, completely indifferent to what had just cracked open inside of me. I didn't rush. I walked slow, measured, careful not to let my legs buckle under the weight of what had just happened. It wasn't just the humiliation, though, God knows, that was bad enough. It was the quiet death of something sacred. I'd never been a perfect father, but I had been there. Always there. Every cold, lonely night. Every scraped knee. Every bad dream. And now, I was just an unwanted guest at my daughter's most important day, erased with a single sentence. "I only want to be with the people I love." She might as well have driven a nail into my chest. But I wouldn't give her, or her mother, the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I got into my car and sat behind the wheel for a while, keys resting in the ignition but not turning. My hands were still trembling. Not with anger, not at first, but with disbelief. I kept replaying the moment in my head like a movie on a loop, trying to spot what I missed. Was there something in her voice I could have caught? Some look she gave me in the months leading up to this? I knew we weren't as close as we used to be, but to lie, and say parents weren't allowed? That wasn't just distance. That was deliberate. That was an attempt to surgically remove me from her life's narrative. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, and then, finally, I turned the key and drove. Not home, just away. I needed air. I needed space to figure out whether I had just lost my daughter forever, or if this was some terrible, twisted phase of independence gone cruel. 3 hours later, I ended up parked in front of an old diner I used to take Ariel to when she was little. The windows were still foggy with grease, and the same dusty jukebox sat in the corner booth where she once spilled her milkshake and cried until the waitress brought her a new one for free. Back then, she used to sit beside me, not across from me, tucked close like the world was too big unless I was anchoring her. Now, I sat alone, watching the cars roll by, wondering how the girl I raised could look at me with such disgust. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, brought me coffee and asked if I was okay. I gave her a tight smile and said, "Just a long day." She nodded, like she'd heard that before, and patted my hand. That small touch nearly broke me. I didn't go to the graduation dinner. I didn't even check my phone. I turned it off completely, afraid I'd see a photo online. A perfectly posed picture of my daughter sandwiched between her mother and stepfather, champagne glasses in the air, smiles too wide, too proud. I didn't want to see them claim credit for a child they didn't raise. I didn't want to hear their friends say things like, "You must be so proud," or "You did such a great job." Because they didn't. I did. I carried the bruises, the fears, the sleepless nights. I earned the right to that front row seat more than anyone else. But somehow, I was the one standing outside. The following morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing violently on the nightstand. I ignored it at first, burying my face in the pillow. But it didn't stop. Call after call, message after message. I sat up, finally, and picked it up. 12 missed calls from Ariel. 2 voicemails. A handful of texts, all in caps. My stomach tightened. I pressed play on the first voicemail. She was crying. "Dad, please. I don't know what happened. The scholarship, they said the funding was gone. I don't understand. You said it was set, remember? You said I was covered. I already signed the housing lease. I don't have anyone else who can help me. Please call me back. Please." My heart didn't race. It didn't even flinch. I just sat there, listening to her panic, and felt something inside me settle. Not out of satisfaction, but clarity. The same girl who said she only wanted the people she loved was now calling the man she discarded just hours earlier because she needed something. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to rush in and save her. I called her back. She picked up on the first ring. "Dad," she said, breathless. "I'm so sorry about yesterday. I didn't mean it like that. I was just overwhelmed. You know how Mom is. She wanted it to be a family moment. I didn't know how to say no." Her words came fast, rehearsed. "Please, I need to know what's going on with the scholarship. They said it's gone. I can't pay for the program without it." I waited. Let the silence stretch. Then I said, calmly, "Ariel, I know. I'm the sponsor. That scholarship? It was from me." Her breath caught. "Wait, what?" I set it up. Quietly. Paid the first installment. "You didn't know because I wanted it to be a surprise. A gift. Something to show you that I believed in you. But yesterday," I exhaled slowly. "Yesterday you told me you only wanted to be with the people you love. And clearly, I wasn't one of them." "Dad, come on," she whispered. "I didn't mean that." "You did," I replied. "And that's okay. You're grown now. You get to choose who matters to you. But so do I. And I'm done being the person you only reach for when you need something." "But you're my dad." "I am," I said. "And I always will be. But I'm not your doormat." There was silence on the other end. Then a small, strangled sob. "I made a mistake." "We all do," I said. "But some mistakes have consequences. Maybe your mom or your stepdad can help you now. After all, you said they're the ones you love." And then, for the first time in years, I hung up the phone. Not out of spite, but peace. The silence that followed that call wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, like a shard of glass buried under skin, subtle but ever-present. For the first time in years, my phone didn't buzz with a "good morning" or a casual "can I borrow money for books?" The quiet was a strange kind of relief, but also a reminder that something permanent had shifted. I had drawn a line, and not the kind of line that invites negotiation or compromise. This was the kind you etch into concrete when you're tired of pretending that pain is just a side effect of love. I knew what I said to her wasn't cruel, but it was final. And final things have a way of echoing louder than intended. I kept wondering if she understood the gravity of my words, or if she was still replaying the moment like I was, trying to frame herself as the victim of a man who had finally decided not to be taken for granted. It was 2 days before I heard from her again. This time, no crying. No apologies. Just a text. You really meant that, didn't you? That was it. No greeting. No punctuation. Just a cold, flat sentence. I stared at it for a long while, unsure whether to respond. I had meant it. Every syllable. But what do you say to your child when the distance between you has stopped being circumstantial and become ideological? I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to beg for her understanding. So I typed back one word. Yes. She didn't reply. I sat there, phone in hand, watching the screen like it might blink back to life. But nothing came. That was when the guilt started to creep in, not because I thought I was wrong, but because some ancient part of my fatherhood still wanted to rescue her. Even now. Even after everything. Later that evening, my sister Lorraine called. She had heard from someone on Facebook, probably Ariel's mother, who always had a flair for dramatics and public sympathy campaigns. What the hell is going on? Lorraine asked, skipping pleasantries entirely. Ariel said you cut her off? After everything. I took a long breath. Did she tell you what she said to me at graduation? Lorraine hesitated. No. She just said you walked out, and then told her to ask her stepdad for tuition money. That you're punishing her. I laughed bitterly. Not at Lorraine, but at how predictable the narrative had become. She told me, in front of her mother and her stepdad, that she only wanted to be with the people she loves. She lied to keep me out of the ceremony. Lied. And then had the nerve to ask for money the next morning. You tell me who's punishing who. Lorraine sighed. She wasn't a parent herself, but she had been around long enough to understand the history. You know she's still a kid in some ways, right? She doesn't understand the damage she's doing. That was the problem. I wasn't sure if I believed that anymore. Ariel was 23. Old enough to file taxes, sign a lease, and craft a sentence designed to cut the man who raised her out of her life. If she's old enough to choose who she loves, I said slowly, she's old enough to deal with the consequences of those choices. Lorraine didn't argue, but I could tell she wanted to. We said goodbye in that awkward way people do when no one's quite sure what side of the fence they're standing on. I hung up feeling more isolated than ever. The next morning, I woke up to a new voicemail. It wasn't Ariel. It was her stepdad, David. I had never spoken to the man in my life. Never met him. All I knew was that he came into Ariel's life sometime after her mother got remarried in Arizona. His voice was low, measured, too polite. Hey, this is David. I wanted to reach out, man to man. I know there's some tension right now, but I think we can work this out. Ariel's future is too important to let misunderstandings get in the way. Maybe we can talk. I played the message 3 times. Each time, I felt more insulted. Man to man. What did he think this was? A business negotiation? A boardroom dispute over a missed invoice? I wasn't just some distant relative with a checkbook. I was her father. I had earned that title with every sleepless night and every dollar I scraped together to keep her life stable. I didn't know him a conversation. Not after what he allowed to happen at that graduation. Still, I did consider calling him. For a split second, I imagined myself being the bigger person, taking the high road. But then I remembered Ariel's face, that smug, irritated expression when she saw me sitting among the parents. I remembered her exact words, the coldness of her tone. It's my happy day, and I only want to be with the people I love. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a declaration. And if David and her mother were the ones she chose to love, then let them figure out how to pay for her future. I wasn't going to be the emergency wallet she reached for after she burned the bridge. The hardest part wasn't ignoring her. It was living in the echo of everything I had once meant to her. I'd walk past her room, the one I'd kept untouched since she left for college, and see the old concert tickets on her corkboard, the framed photo of us at her 8th grade science fair. I'd find birthday cards she made for me in crayon, tucked into drawers I hadn't opened in years. Best dad ever. Thanks for loving me when no one else did. I held those cards in my hands like they were artifacts from a lost civilization. Proof that once, I was enough. More than enough. I hadn't changed. I hadn't faltered. She had just moved on. Or maybe she had rewritten the story in her head to make it easier to ignore what I'd done for her. People do that sometimes. Especially when they need to feel justified in cutting you out. That night, I poured myself a drink, whiskey no ice, and sat on the porch with the scholarship paperwork. I read through every line like it was a will. I had been ready to give her something that could have changed her life. Now, It was just a reminder of how far I was willing to go for someone who no longer saw me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat in the dark, the quiet hum of crickets around me, and let the weight of the decision settle like dust. I hadn't abandoned her. I had simply stopped volunteering to be invisible. It was the voicemail that finally broke whatever fragile layer of detachment I'd been holding on to. Not Ariel's crying, not her stepfather's polished attempt at diplomacy, but the voice of her mother. I hadn't heard from her in years, not since she emailed me a list of co-parenting boundaries, and then disappeared into a new life with her real estate license and shiny SUV. But suddenly, there she was, on my voicemail, her tone sharp with a kind of entitlement that sent my blood simmering before she even got halfway through her message. "You've made your point," she said. "But this isn't about you. It's about our daughter, and you sabotaging her future just because your pride got hurt is disgusting. Grow up, Thomas." That was it. No hello. No context. Just a condescending jab meant to pierce whatever fatherhood still lived in my chest. And for a second, just a second, I let it. I stared at the wall, that message playing over and over in my head, and it took everything in me not to punch a hole through the drywall. Not because of her words, but because of the revisionist history they represented. Our daughter? Since when? Where was when Ariel had a 103-degree fever and I slept upright on the floor next to her bed, checking her temperature every hour because I didn't have health insurance? Where was when I had to leave her at the garage after school because I couldn't afford childcare and her mother didn't even return my calls? The audacity, the absolute audacity, of that woman to speak like I was just some bitter ex throwing a tantrum. I wasn't punishing Ariel. I was removing myself from a cycle of manipulation where my love was only welcomed when it came with a check. I wanted to let it go. I really did. I wanted to be the bigger person, let her words roll off my back, and pretend none of it mattered. But some truths demand to be spoken. So I called her back. Not to argue, not to fight, just to remind her who she was talking to. When she answered, her voice was already clipped and impatient. "So, you finally decided to stop sulking?" I ignored the bait. "You don't get to rewrite history, Renee," I said calmly. "You walked out. You left her. You sent birthday gifts late and called from beaches while I worked nights trying to keep the lights on. Don't call me with that fake moral superiority now that she's grown and useful to your image." She scoffed. "You think this is about image?" I cut her off. "I think this is about convenience. You were a ghost until she started posting pictures with you on Instagram. And now suddenly, you're Mother of the Year." There was a long silence, the kind that usually ends in either an apology or a declaration of war. Renee chose the latter. "You're just bitter because she's closer to us now. She loves David. She respects him." I almost laughed. "She doesn't respect him. She uses him the same way she used me. She's just smart enough to keep it polite because she still needs something from you." That hit a nerve. I could hear it in her breath. "You're a petty little man," she spat. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm a father who finally realized that unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional access." And then I hung up. I sat down in the living room after that, my hands trembling, not from anger anymore, but from adrenaline. I hadn't spoken to Renee like that in over a decade. Not because I was afraid, but because I thought staying quiet was the mature thing to do. That if I kept my mouth shut, I could somehow shield Ariel from the fallout. But shielding her had only enabled this alternate version of reality where her mother was some misunderstood saint and I was the grumpy, inflexible parent who didn't know when to let go. I'd spent years letting people take from me my money, my time, my credit, my emotional bandwidth. Because I thought that's what a good father did. But I wasn't sure anymore. Maybe a good father also knew when to stop allowing himself to be used. 2 days later, the gossip started. Subtle at first, mutual friends texting vague things like, "Hey, just checking in," or "I've heard there's tension with Ariel." Then the real stuff came. Screenshots of Renee's Facebook post. A long, performative paragraph about how co-parenting is hard when one parent weaponizes finances and guilt, followed by dozens of sympathetic comments from people who had no idea what the hell they were talking about. One woman even wrote, "So sorry you have to deal with that. You're such a strong mom." I wanted to reply. I wanted to flood the comments with receipts and timestamps and photos of Ariel in my arms while Renee was on a beach with her new husband. But I didn't. Because that's what they expected. Another man unraveling publicly while the women played martyr. No, I'd already made my point. The only people who needed to understand it were the ones who'd seen my life firsthand. Then came the email. From Ariel. Long, carefully worded, clearly drafted and redrafted until it sounded polished but emotionally vacant. She wrote that she was hurt by my decision, that she never meant to exclude me, but I overreacted and was now jeopardizing her future over a misunderstanding. She never once apologized. Not truly. She said things like, "I'm sorry you felt hurt," which is a long way from, "I'm sorry for what I did." She framed everything as if she had simply made a clumsy mistake, not a calculated choice to erase me from a moment I had earned with years of devotion. The most telling part was at the end, when she wrote, "I just hope you can rise above this. I still need your help." That was the final crack in the dam. Because it wasn't an appeal to love, it was a resume for continued support. Not, "I love you." Not, "I miss you." Just, "I still need your help." And that's when it hit me. I wasn't a father to her anymore. I was a sponsor, a background investor in the brand of her success. And now that I'd stopped writing checks, she was issuing formal appeals like I was the HR department of her life. I closed the email without replying. I didn't even archive it. I wanted it there in my inbox, unread, a reminder that clarity sometimes comes in the ugliest wrapping. Later that week, my neighbor Carl came over. He was in his 60s, retired, sharp as hell. He'd watched Ariel grow up from the porch next door, seen me scraping ice off my windshield at 5 a.m. while getting her to school on time. We were sitting on my porch when he said, "You're taking this hard, huh?" I nodded. He lit his cigarette, took a slow drag, and said, "You know, my daughter stopped talking to me for 5 years after I told her no to a down payment. 5 years. Came back with a kid and an apology. Took her that long to understand the value of what I gave her." Sometimes love isn't supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be true. That stuck with me. Not because it made me feel better, but because it reminded me that I wasn't alone. That maybe the love I gave wasn't invisible, just inconvenient to recognize until the cost was felt. The strange thing about silence is how loud it becomes once you stop resisting it. After the emails, the voicemails, the emotional spin from Ariel, Renee, and even David, everything just stopped. No new calls. No fresh accusations. No texts masked as concern. My phone became a quiet slab of plastic again, and I was left with the echo of what used to be a relationship. At first, it felt peaceful, like I could finally breathe. But breathing too deeply when you've been suffocating for years can make your chest ache in ways you didn't expect. I'd catch myself looking at my phone out of habit, half expecting another emotional landmine waiting in my notifications. But there was nothing. Just the date, the time, and my reflection in the black screen. Older than I remembered, lonelier than I cared to admit. And that's when the real weight settled. Not the anger, not even the betrayal, just the haunting absence of someone I had once known better than I knew myself. Some evenings, I'd go into Ariel's old room and just stand there. I never touched anything. I didn't need to. Every inch of it was a museum to a time when she still saw me as her entire world. Her bookshelf still held the dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web I used to read to her every night. The unicorn lamp I bought from a garage sale still sat crooked on her desk. The mirror was framed with Polaroids from high school dances, birthday sleepovers, and family barbecues. Photos where she stood next to me, smiling without hesitation. That girl felt like a dream I'd woken up from too soon. It was hard to believe she'd grown into the woman who could look me in the eye and say I didn't belong at her graduation. I wasn't angry when I stood in her room. I was just hollow, like I had spent 2 decades building a cathedral, only for her to burn the blueprints and move into a mansion someone else bought her. I started getting strange looks at the grocery store. Nothing overt, just the kind of subtle glances people give when they've read something online or heard a juicy story in a group chat. I knew Renee's social media post had legs. Mutual acquaintances who hadn't spoken to me in years were suddenly liking my old photos or sending vague DMs. One woman, a former coworker of Renee's, even reached out and said, Just wanted you to know I see what you're going through. Stay strong. What the hell did that even mean? I didn't reply. I didn't need pity, especially not from strangers who only knew a curated version of my life through someone else's self-serving lens. If they wanted to believe I was the villain, let them. I had no interest in defending myself to people who hadn't been there when Ariel was throwing up at 2 a.m. and I was too broke to call an ambulance. If they weren't there then, they didn't get a seat at the judgment table now. But one person did show up, unexpectedly, and exactly when I needed it. Ms. Carter, Ariel's 8th grade teacher. She knocked on my door one Saturday afternoon with a Tupperware of lemon bars and that same warm smile I remembered from parent-teacher conferences. I was in the neighborhood, she said, though we both knew that was a lie. She lived 45 minutes away. I invited her in, and we sat at the kitchen table like it was 2012 again, and we were discussing Ariel's science project. I've been following things, she said gently, not needing to explain what she meant. I just wanted to tell you something. I nodded, silent. She looked me square in the eye. She loved you so much, Tom. I've taught hundreds of kids, and I always knew which ones had real support at home. Ariel was one of the lucky ones. Don't let her rewrite that. That meant more to me than I could explain. Not because I needed validation, but because I needed someone objective, to say out loud that I hadn't imagined the bond we once shared. That it wasn't just me clinging to an illusion. She told me about the time Ariel wrote an essay called My Hero, and it was all about me. She read it aloud in class. Ms. Carter said, tearing up a little. She said, "My dad is my best friend, even when I'm mad at him." I swallowed the lump in my throat and blinked hard. That was the Ariel I remembered. The one who used to say, "We're a team," when things got hard. The one who held my hand during thunderstorms and whispered, "Always." That girl didn't vanish. She just forgot. After Ms. Carter left, I sat on the porch again, lemon bar in hand, staring out at nothing. I thought about how love changes. How sometimes it stretches and bends to fit new versions of people, and other times it snaps completely, leaving you holding the pieces like they're puzzle parts to a picture that no longer exists. I wasn't naive. I knew people grow up, make mistakes, drift apart. But this felt different. This felt like being edited out of a book I had written by hand, one painful chapter at a time. It wasn't that Ariel didn't need me anymore. It was that she didn't want me anymore. And that realization doesn't knock the wind out of you. It removes it entirely. So you just sit there, lungs full of memories, unable to exhale. I thought about reaching out. Just once. Not to reopen the wound, but to remind her who I was. I drafted the message a dozen times. I'm still proud of you, even if you've forgotten what we've been through. Delete. I hope you get everything you want in life, including clarity. Delete. If you ever remember who held you when your world fell apart, you know where I live. Delete. Nothing sounded right. Nothing felt both honest and respectful of the boundary I had so painfully drawn. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done as a father. I closed my phone, and I left it at that. That night, I pulled the scholarship file from the drawer again, not to reconsider it, but to let it go. I burned it in the fireplace, one page at a time. The agreement letter, the payment receipt, the acceptance email. Watching the flames eat away at all the things I had hoped to give her was strangely liberating. Painful, yes, but clean. I wasn't holding on to dreams anymore. I was letting reality settle in. And that reality was this. Sometimes the people we love grow into someone who doesn't love us back the same way. And it doesn't mean we failed. It just means they chose something, or someone else. And all we can do is stand still and refuse to chase them. Weeks turned into a quiet kind of normal. I went back to work at the garage, started picking up Saturday shifts again, just to fill the hours more than anything else. The guys didn't ask questions, though I could tell they knew something had changed. I wasn't the same. The spark that usually showed up when someone brought in a busted engine or when a teenager asked how to change their oil, gone. I moved slower, talked less, ate lunch in my truck instead of the break room. They let me be, which I appreciated. There's something sacred about a man's silence when his heart's been broken, especially when the people around him know better than to try and patch it up with advice or jokes. Some wounds aren't meant to be stitched. They're meant to be left open until the air stings enough for the healing to begin on its own. I stopped checking my phone altogether. not out of defiance, but because I didn't want to keep hoping for a message that would never come. Ariel hadn't reached out since that final email. No follow-up, no apology, no holiday check-in, just absence, the kind that felt intentional. And that, in a strange way, made it easier to move forward. Her silence wasn't a cry for attention. It wasn't even confusion. It was a choice. She had chosen to live her life without the man who once braided her hair and stayed up all night Googling how to make her a homemade volcano for science class. That truth burned less the more I repeated it. I'd wake up some mornings and whisper it into the bathroom mirror. She made her choice. And so did I. Over time, that became my anthem. Not out of anger, but survival. My neighbor Carl came over again one Sunday, this time holding 2 beers instead of his usual cigarette. "Thought you could use one," he said, handing it to me without asking. We sat on the porch in silence for a while, watching squirrels chase each other across the power lines. Finally, he said, "You know, you remind me a lot of my brother." I raised an eyebrow. "That good or bad?" He chuckled. "Painful. He raised his stepson for 15 years. Paid for his braces, his football camps, prom tuxedos, the whole thing. The kid got a full ride to college and didn't even mention him in the graduation speech. Thanked his real dad instead. Broke my brother in half." I listened, the sting of familiarity crawling up my spine. "So what happened?" I asked. Carl took a long sip, then said, "He let him go. Hardest thing he ever did. But years later, the kid came back. Said he'd grown up. Realized who really showed up for him." I wanted to believe that was possible, but I also knew not every story ends that way. Later that evening, I sat down with a journal Ariel had given me on my birthday when she was 12. It was wrapped in glittery paper, and inside the front cover, she had written, "For Dad. So you can finally write about yourself instead of just fixing everyone else's stuff." I'd never used it. Not once. I always said I was too busy, that journaling wasn't my thing. But now, sitting there in the soft light of the living room, I opened to the first blank page and picked up a pen. And for the first time, I wrote, not about her, not about Renee, but about me. About who I was before I became someone's father. About the dreams I once had. About the things I lost, and the things I found in the process of raising a child alone. I wrote about the sacrifices, yes, but also the pride. The quiet victories. The private joys of watching her become someone brilliant, even if that brilliance no longer had room for me. And as the ink bled into the page, I felt something loosen in my chest. I realized that part of my pain came not just from losing her, but from losing the identity I'd built around being her dad. Every decision I made for years had been filtered through the lens of fatherhood. What kind of example am I setting? What does she need from me? How can I make her life easier? That purpose had grounded me through every storm. And now, without it, I was drifting. But maybe that wasn't a tragedy. Maybe it was an invitation. An invitation to find out who I was outside of the role I played. To be a man again, not just a parent. To explore the parts of myself that had gone dormant while I was carrying someone else's future on my back. That week, I booked a short trip. Just a cabin up north by the lake. Nothing fancy. I brought books, my old fishing rod, and that journal. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. No announcements. No social media posts. Just me, finally choosing myself after decades of choosing everyone else. I spent the days reading and fishing and sleeping without alarms. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Healing. One morning, I stood barefoot on the dock as the sun rose, and I said aloud to no one in particular, I did my job. Not perfectly. Not without mistakes. But with everything I had. And that's what mattered. I wasn't walking away from Ariel. I was releasing the version of her I'd been holding on to. The girl who used to look at me like I was her entire world. That version was gone. And it was time to honor that with grace, not bitterness. When I got back, there was a single envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Inside was a card. No apology. No explanation. Just a printed quote. Sometimes the hardest part isn't letting go, but learning to start over. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting on the envelope was hers. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to respond. I just put it on the fridge and walked away. Maybe it was a gesture of peace. Maybe it was just guilt. I didn't need to decode it. All I needed was to remember that I was still standing, still whole, still worthy of love, even if it no longer came from the person I raised. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you raised, supported, or deeply loved because they no longer saw your worth, this story is for you. Drop a comment if you've ever chosen self-respect over being someone's safety net. Let's talk about the strength it takes to set boundaries and the peace that follows when you finally do. If this story hit home, like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about love, betrayal, and finding your voice again. See you soon in the next story.